There is something important to learn from Charlie Kirk. This is my take. Do you ever feel compromised as a man in terms of how you behave and what you say? Although it seems to go unnoticed, I believe the average man today is a shell of who he could be. From an early age, the pressure is on to fit into a society where being a real man is treated like a problem. We've grown up in a culture that is increasingly feminized. Natural male behaviors are viewed with suspicion. If you're blunt, you're toxic. If you take risks, you're irresponsible. If you merely hold your ground in a conflict situation, you're aggressive. The message is clear: act less like a man and more like a woman, or you just won't fit in. The thing is, this hasn't always been the case. I look back at my father and grandfather's generations, and the way they lived would have put them outside the accepted ways of today. By modern standards, they'd be called Sigma, men who operated by their own rules, who didn't need approval, who rarely related their worries, let alone showing feelings. But back then, it wasn't a style, it was just what men were. Most men didn't walk around explaining themselves. They didn't seek consensus for every decision. Their word stood on its own. When a man said something, it carried weight and didn't need explaining. He'd back up the few things he said with action. So men were generally clear in their role. A man's reputation for getting things done counted, not his ability to avoid being labeled something bad by the woke police. Now the atmosphere is very different. You feel like you can't speak plainly without first running through a checklist in your head. Will this upset someone? Will it be misinterpreted? Will I be attacked for saying it out loud? That isn't living comfortably. It forces hesitation, self-editing, and a kind of restraint that shrinks our natural confidence. The irony is that this environment, which was supposed to make people more sensitive, has left men dishonest with themselves. When you're always holding back, softening your words, hiding your real opinions, what the world gets is a hollow version of you. It's unsatisfying because it doesn't line up with how men are meant to be. You have to keep small, even if you weren't born with the personality of a mouse. Now I feel that many men, especially the more reserved ones, are caught in a bind between silence and chatter. In a world where you might sense an undercurrent of hostility, you want to keep your mouth shut, but then dark minds around you can paint their own picture. You could be assumed to lack social skills, to be gruff, or even a creep, so you feel pressure to talk and dispel any suspicion. Hey, look at me, you're saying with your chit-chat, I'm a nice guy after all. I do take inspiration from Charlie Kirk. He was misunderstood by many. He was an activist, not just someone who liked debating college kids. But he put himself out there, said it straight, and meant what he said. That was courage. That was being a man. After his example, what excuse do any of us have for shrinking when we should be speaking up? But I'm not here to hand out advice as such, merely reflect on human phenomena. I have to say that Charlie could be tactful and was always wanting to see the positive side of humanity. I've often got myself into unnecessary trouble through bluntness. It's frustrating watching a bunch of people pretending to be nice and no one having the guts to call out bullshit. Here's one example that's familiar to many. Australia, like other Western countries, has an immigration problem. We're taking in so many that housing costs are through the roof and living standards are falling. But if anyone raises this issue, you're expected to cushion it with disclaimers and apologies to make sure no one feels emotionally hurt in some way. For crying out loud, it's an obvious problem with an obvious solution. Why can't a man just say what he thinks and have people accept that as his honest thoughts? Something that really bugs me is all this second guessing of people's intentions and motivations. Men used to speak frankly and be able to have honest, robust conversations. Where did that go? Personally, my thoughts come out like a computer printout of the logical workings of my mind. That's how men naturally think. But now we're required to do everything in a female way. We have to signal stuff when we speak, signal our virtues, and quietly let people know which side we're on. Personally, I've lost patience with that. Can we just tell it straight? No more dancing around trying to protect emotions and stay ever so tight with the group. Who gets so hurt by words anyway? Not me. I just want truth. It's called being a grown-up man. I won't cry if you offend me, and neither should anyone of adult age. The whole push to make men act and communicate like women did have a point a long time ago. There was a certain callousness to society after the Second World War. Parents, especially fathers, were often distant from their children. So I welcome some of the changes that happened, with fathers becoming a little more expressive and more willing to show love. But certain agendas took over and were pushed too far. One of them is feminism. I don't believe that men were heavily oppressing women, that they naturally do this without intervention, or that they need constant control to prevent them from being abusive. I saw none of that in the relationships around me growing up. Men and women simply had different roles. They shared the load and weren't keeping score. My mother and grandmothers were strong women who didn't need rescuing from their own husbands. That is a ridiculous idea. So why should we accept a world where sons are apparently paying for the sins of their fathers? What sins? As far as I can tell, my male ancestors were good people who should be thanked for their contributions to building modern society, not treated as backward folks who created a problem that today's woke warriors need to keep solving. The real insight I have to share is what happens when you do stand up with pride and a willingness to be honest. I've noticed that things often work out eventually. You may lose some people when you deviate from the group and groupthink, but those people perhaps weren't worth keeping around. Speaking your mind is a way of finding out who is loyal to you and for whom your friendship is conditional. It also shows you the ones who are so weak they can't handle reality or genuine exchanges of thought. It is liberating not to waste energy worrying about perceptions all the time. This is the beauty of striving to be an authentic man. Decisions come faster without second guessing because they're grounded in what you actually know and believe. The results may not always be perfect because people are quick to judge and criticize, but so what? What you find is that people ultimately respect you more. Even those who disagree can't deny the strength in speaking plainly, and most people, unless they're your boss or something, have little power over you, even if they'd like to believe otherwise. I've had people actually try to call the police on me just for speaking my mind in certain situations. That's how messed up society has become. But each time it only revealed their weakness. Do they think the local police are also the thought police? No. What it really shows is that they aren't living in the real world. Their last resort against having their groupthink challenged is to try to intimidate you. And when it falls flat, you see how little power they actually hold. Society has been getting off track lately. The quality of life has been deteriorating, and much of it comes down to men not being heard. I believe we need men again to set things right. How do you think society was built in the first place? It was built by men making rational, cold decisions without interference or anxiety, with the support of women beside them. That balance worked. But what do we give up when we try to prove how nice we are, how feminine we can act? We give up a large part of our strength. So believe in your ability as a man to think clearly, to act rationally, and to be correct even when others don't like it.